Together, we can.
Together we can.
Together we can.
Together we can save lives. Please give to our research projects. Visit kidneycancercanada.ca.
So it was very important for us as we were putting the conference together to have as many patient voices as we can in the conference. It's very important. I've been hearing back from many of you from industry and from people attending that is speaking to you loudly. So we have a caregiver and a patient moderating this session. Paul is here. He is a patient, and he has that magic number 4 on his badge, which is exciting because last time it was 3. And Marianne is joining us, and they are going to moderate this section. So please give them a big welcome. Thank you.
Yeah, as Stephen was saying, I'm a 4-year survivor of the kidney cancer, and I'm taking an oral drug, oral anti-cancer drug. And since my diagnosis, I've been very interested in research and finding a cure. And Marianne and I wanted to moderate this discussion. We hope that medical science will find a cure for us. We all know that research will move this forward, and I'm not exactly clear on what will make that happen, and probably the rest of you aren't. So this panel is going to explain to us how it's going to work. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. I'm Marianne. I'm Paul's wife. And if you were to ask me what I wanted most in life, most in this world, I'd have to say that I want Paul's kidney cancer to go away and stay away and never come back. And I'd be willing to bet that there's a few of us in this room as caregivers and patients ourselves who wish the same thing. So what we need to do, is to start talking about finding the cure. We have some great panel members here today, and they'll answer some questions about just how that's going to happen. One thing we know for sure is that without research, new treatments won't happen. We also know that it probably won't happen as fast as we'd like it to. So I'd like to think of the theme of this panel as cure on a continuum, always moving that little slider closer to that goal of finding a cure. We know it takes time, it takes commitment, and above all, it takes money to move a potential cure from a test tube to the point where it becomes a viable treatment for kidney cancer patients. And to get there, it involves research facilities, and we're lucky we have some good ones here in Canada, funding of research projects, and clinical trials to prove the efficacy of new drugs. We're lucky here today. We have a wonderful panel of experts who know the system, and they're going to be happy to answer any questions you have. We're going to give each of them a few minutes to tell us about themselves and what they do, and then we'll open the floor for your questions. First, I'd like to introduce Ranjena Maloni. She's the project manager of Kidney Cancer Research Network of Canada. Ranjena, when I think of research, I see a bunch of medical specialists sitting in a lab looking through microscope at tumor samples. What does research really look like at the Cancer Research Network, and how does it work?
I think this is on, right? Yep. Okay, hi. Thank you so much for inviting me to be here on this panel. I'm representing the Kidney Cancer Research Network of Canada, and basically what the network is clinicians, scientists, researchers, and patients and caregivers who have an invested interest in kidney cancer research. So basically, we only do kidney cancer research, and we only do it here in Canada, or we collaborate, but that's basically the foundation of the network is kidney cancer research. So it's a group of these clinicians basically and researchers, and the vision is, we really want to move the dial forward, and we want to promote kidney cancer research here in Canada. So that's our vision, and that's our mandate, basically. And when you talk about what does that mean, is it a bunch of scientists standing in front of a test tube? It's really everything and all-encompassing in terms of the research network. We have a really large country, and we have lots of great lab scientists, but also great, psychosocial experts. We have great exercise experts. We have all different types of people who have really important questions that they want to answer relevant to kidney cancer research. So it's not necessarily, one group of people doing one specific thing. What we really do and what we really promote is all types of kidney cancer research. So I hope that somewhat answered your question. I can just give you a couple brief examples of some of the stuff we do and what a day for the network looks like. Basically, we look for, funding to help so that this research can happen. And then we look at different projects and different people across the country who want to work in kidney cancer research. So there might be a group who are looking at, immunotherapies, a novel target agent. And they might say, look, we really want to apply this to kidney cancer cells. We're thinking about doing it in breast, we're thinking about doing it in prostate, but, we think there might be an interest here in doing it in kidney cancer cells. So as the network, we want them to look at kidney cancer cells. We want to encourage those scientists to, try and find an answer for us, try and help us find the cure for our disease. So it's a lot of advocating for these different groups to look at kidney cancer as a priority. It's also a lot of making sure collaborations happen. Earlier today, we talked a bit about the Canadian Kidney Cancer Information System. If we wouldn't be able to answer a lot of the questions that we're answering now with that information system if it wasn't a collaboration across the country. We might have a patient here from Victoria who's in it, and a patient from St. John, Newfoundland who's in it. And if we weren't putting all of that information together, we wouldn't be able to answer what is really happening across the country. And with those answers, we can then write a consensus guidelines. So Dr. Rayum and Dr. Lavallee, they mentioned earlier today that they're part of this network. What happens is they can kind of all meet together, sit at a table and say, what should we recommend as the consensus across Canada? What is the evidence telling us, so that a community doctor or you can go to your doctor and say, this is what these experts are saying. Does this apply to me? Is this is the evidence, and this is what they think. So that's the type. So the research is not necessarily always in a lab or always in a test tube. It's also, sitting around a table, talking, looking at the papers, looking at the literature. So that's just a little bit about what we do.
Thank you, Ranjena. Sitting beside Ranjena is Kelley Parato, and she's the Director of Scientific Affairs at BioCanRX. Kelley, how does the work of BioCanRX help contribute to a cure for kidney cancer?
Okay, well, I'd like to thank everyone for inviting me here today to talk about BioCanRX, and I'm really enjoying your forum. I think it's incredibly informative. So our organization actually is what is called an NCE network. We receive federal funds to execute research, building collaborative teams that span Canada. And the focus of our research in general is immune oncology and immune style therapies. And so while our focus isn't kidney cancer in particular, our cancer is developing tools and new therapies that could be really effective in all kinds of cancer. And so we specifically have identified that, now I'll take one step back, I'm wearing a researcher hat and a funder hat. And as a researcher who had spent a long time trying to find funding to get those vital new discoveries out of the lab where we're really good at curing mice, But we need to stop curing mice, and we need to develop the reagents and the technologies and the infrastructure to be able to develop intelligent, innovative clinical trials. And so we did, over many years, scrape together money from a variety of sources, which we can talk about later. But we built this capacity now to develop on an innovative Canadian therapy. And we have gone after the federal government to give us this grant fund so that we can say, researchers across Canada, if you have a great idea that has fantastic potential in your cancer indication of choice, please apply to us. And we can try to get you the funding and the resources and the expertise that you need to get those products into clinical testing.
Thank you very much, Kelley. We also have here today Anna O'Brien. She's a clinical trials coordinator at the Ottawa Hospital Cancer Centre. Anna, in your role at the Ottawa Cancer Centre, what role do you find, what role do kidney cancer patients play in contributing to research in kidney cancer?
Hi, so yes, I'm at the Ottawa Hospital Cancer Centre, where I also did my master's in cancer therapeutics. So I've been in the lab, and now I'm on the clinical trials side of it. So seeing patients and being the hub between the clinical trial group, so if that's the pharmaceutical company or research organization, the oncologist, and the patient. So I'm kind of the person that brings that all together. And if a new clinical trial is, if they want to be successful, they need patients. And so they approach different academic centers. Ottawa is one of them. And I am the lead contact. So I review the protocol, and I propose it to our kidney cancer oncologist. So I present it to them, and they decide which trials we're going to participate in. And the decision is based on the benefit for the patient. So what do our patients need? Do we have a hole? We don't have any treatment for this situation, then we need a clinical trial to address that. So we try and have a good number of trials open at any time that can benefit all types of patients. And just to give you an example, right now we have some trials open with immunotherapy in the adjuvant setting. We talked about that earlier as well. We have some new targeted therapies that we're looking at, and some radiation studies as well. Participating in a clinical trial can be very fulfilling. You get assigned a research assistant like me. So I help you through the whole process, and I book your appointments and your tests and make sure that no test results are forgotten. You will not fall through the cracks when you're on a clinical trial. Everything is kept, very, very strict guidelines on reporting information. And as well, I'm in the oncologist's office with you, and either translating things. When the oncologist is only there for 7 minutes, I stay there with you and talk to you more detail about what you're feeling and recording everything. Also, once you've gone home, if you have any questions, I'm only a phone call away. So I have a desk with a phone that I actually answer. So I know that it's hard to get a hold of your oncologist, but it's not hard to get hold of a clinical trial assistant. So you get really, really good care, and we're there to help you through the whole process. So it's hopefully not a scary thing when when you have one of us who are there helping you through the whole thing.
Okay, thank you. Did you want?
Yeah, Deb, you're up next. What can we all do to advance funding for our kidney cancer?
Okay, thanks, Marianne and Paula. I want to congratulate you both for leading sessions. Is this working? Yeah. It's been deliberately turned off.
Okay, Stephen made sure the mic was turned off when he came to me. So I've met some really great people here, some patients that I've only met online before. So just for those of you who haven't been bored to death with my story, I'm I was diagnosed at age 14, so that means I'm a 42-year survivor. Yeah, that's ridiculous. But the really interesting thing is I've been metastatic for 21 years, so I've been terminal for 21 years, and somehow I'm still here. So we've been through the survive it session and the live it session. I'm ready for the fed up with it session. We'll meet after this meeting. So the people who are truly fed up with this frigging disease, we all meet outside. But okay, I've got a few joiners. Because the truth is, in the last 10 years that I've been putting my volunteer time into kidney cancer, we have not really moved the dial very much. When we started 10 years ago, people were dying in about a year. With metastatic disease, they lived a year. Now, more or less, a lot of patients go up to 5 years, but patients are still dying. I lost my good friend Tony Clark, who started this group with me, and we lost Arlene's mom, Dale. Far too many people are still dying of kidney cancer. There is an urgency. This is an incredibly lethal disease. Make no mistake. And it's on the rise worldwide. So here's a number. By the year 2020, kidney cancer incidence will have risen by 22%. This is one of the few cancers worldwide where the incidence is going up. And so as a worldwide community, we have to do something about this. So it's tied to obesity, yes, it's tied to smoking, especially in developing world, et cetera. But that's the global world. Within Canada, we have an amazing team of researchers who are truly collaborative, and we have them working through the Kidney Cancer Research Network. And as patients and survivors, we're in there like a dirty shirt. We're with them all of the time. And they came to us a couple of years ago and said, help us prioritize what is important to research. So we worked through a project, and some of you in the room were involved in this, called the James Lind Alliance methodology, where they went out, we came up with 2,000 things that we needed researched, and that had to get boiled down like we do the maple syrup thing, So it got boiled down to the essence of 29 top research things, and then we had to meet in a room. They closed the doors and they said, come up with the top 10. And so we spent all day, and we came up with the top 10 research priorities, so that is fantastic. But the truth is, we don't have the funds to put against those top 10 research priorities. So I'm going to guess here that all of you give to cancer. We all give to cancer. So if you give $1 to a general cancer charity, shout out if you've got a guess how much of that goes to kidney cancer. It's close to zero. It's 1.1 cents. For every $1 that goes to a general cancer charity, 1.1 cents goes to kidney cancer. So if you want to do the Ride to Conquer, the Walk to End, do it, because it's great exercise, and you're helping somebody, and you're helping these general cancer communities. So if that's your goal, by all means do it. But if your goal is to help support kidney cancer research, well, let's face it, it's the disease that's going to take a lot of us out. If that's your goal, we have to pool our pennies together. The only way to do that in Canada that I'm aware of is to get the money into the hands of Kidney Cancer Canada, check off that you want it to go to research, and Kidney Cancer Canada, the board, has made a policy statement that every $1 that goes to research gets handed to the Kidney Cancer Research Network of Canada to address that top 10 list. So there is no better deal for you in the world than to find your hard-earned money, get it into the Kidney Cancer Research Network of Canada. And I'm not going to come around looking for, this is not about raising money at this meeting, but for everybody here to think about what could you do? Whether it's an individual donation yourself, whether you could do a fundraiser, whether you know somebody who could help, whether you could somehow organize something around World Kidney Cancer Day in June. But please go away thinking about this, because if we are still waiting for those pennies to trickle down into kidney cancer, then we'll be waiting another decade, and lots of us won't be here.
Thank you, Deb. I think that's something that probably a lot of us didn't realize here today, how little of the money goes actually to kidney cancer research. And maybe some of us also didn't know that, that we need more people in clinical trials. So if you could probably discuss that with your oncologist, if you have, some idea that you might like to participate in something, and very, very certainly with our new initiative, the World Kidney Cancer Day in June 22nd, we could also make the whole month a fundraising month for us, and you could do anything. No amount would be too small.
It would be.
Actually, any money would be good because it's money we don't have now. So my next statement was, no amount of money is too large. That's right. And anything in between would be great as well. So think of any kind of fundraiser or any kind of donation you'd like to give. Maybe when your family gets together for their family picnic and you have 150 people there, you pass around a hat. That sort of thing. But do something, and maybe do it once or twice a year. Whenever you have people together, you have an opportunity. So I'd like people to think about that and to remember that the Kidney Cancer Research Network needs money for their research.
And Marianne, if I could add something. So every dollar that we get goes towards kidney cancer research. So it's not, like the 1% that's going to happen after you give the dollar to us. But also one thing that we really try and strive to do is to create those partnerships. So a group like BioCanRX or other groups, so if we can take your dollar and make it $2 or make it $3, that's what we try and spend a lot of our time and effort doing, because that's more money for kidney cancer research. So we always look for those like leveraging opportunities, those partnership opportunities. And also the other thing I want to stress is that we make our priorities based on what your priorities are. We really try to make sure, this is why we're doing it. We're doing this research for all of the people in this room, all the caregivers, all the people watching online. And if you have a group of people who are really passionate about genetics or really passionate about, distress in the clinics, and they want to answer some questions about that. We've got expert Canadians across this country who are wanting those funds to answer those questions. I sat here today and I listened to lots of different talks, and throughout the talks there was a lot of, we don't really know the answer quite yet, but we want to answer this. There was biomarkers that we talked about. There was complementary medicine. There was a whole biopsies, surveillance. All of those types of topics were covered. And every time it was covered, there was, we still don't quite know all the answers yet. And that's really what we want to do. Move that dial forward, get towards that cure, but answer a lot of those little questions along the way. And those little questions don't often have to take a huge sum of money. I promise you, we will take your little bit and see how far we can stretch it and how much we can do and create results, create publications, and create information that we can present at these meetings moving forward. So
we have a question over here.
Yeah.
It's Stephen. I just want to just change the tone of the telethon discussion that we've got going on up there, and I think it's very important. And certainly we're going to talk a little bit just at the close about the Together We Can Save Lives campaign that we are launching for the month of June. But I think it's important, Ranjena, if you wouldn't mind just going over. I mean, I know that we've just contributed some money, and you talk about this partnership, how you leverage that with the Canadian Urological Association. And please talk about the process of the commitment of those funds and what those funds are actually going to do, because I think it's important if we give our money, but what actually happens to it, and what do we see, and what's the benefit?
Yeah, absolutely. So recently, probably throughout the holiday season and into earlier this year, we worked closely with Kidney Cancer Canada and the Canadian Urologic Association Scholarship Foundation. So us as the research network, we went to both these groups, and we're very good close partners with Kidney Cancer Canada, and said, we want to create a research grant. We know that there's a lot of academics and a lot of scientists and clinicians out there who have questions that we want to give them some money to be able to answer. And so Kidney Cancer Canada and the Canadian Urologic Scholarship Foundation said, look, we might not be able to give you all that you want, but we'll give you half. So they came in agreeing to do a match funds, and with that, we made a call out to anybody, any academic researcher, anyone who has a question that they wanted to answer relating to kidney cancer could submit a proposal. And we got, I think there was 12 really, really strong proposals, but with the money, we were able to fund 3 of them. So the 3 that were funded are from across the country. I think the one I can quickly describe what they are. One of them is in Edmonton, and they're looking at a new target agent to block the metastasis of clear cell renal cell carcinoma. So it's a lab out there. They've been doing a lot of work in other types of cancer, and now with the funds that we're able to give them, and we're talking about $40,000, they are now, over the next year, going to use that $40,000 and try and move the dial on this question. There's a group in Ottawa. They also had a new novel immunotherapy agent that was being looked at in other types of cancer, and with the $43,000 that we're giving them over the next year, they've now got a surgical scientist who is going to look at this target agent in renal cell carcinoma. So without that money, if someone else, they would have done something else, basically, or it would have just sat in the lab, and nothing would have moved forward over the next year. And then the third group is a group in Vancouver. With that, they were the third. They won the award as well. They're looking at biomarkers. So one of the top 10 priorities that came out of that James Lind Alliance, it actually came up a few times if you look at the top 10, was biomarkers. How do we know who's going to respond? How do we know who's going to do well with what therapies? So they're looking at circulating tumor DNA cells for metastatic kidney cancer. So trying to get closer to that curate, knowing who is going to respond. And that's all thanks to Kidney Cancer Canada and the Canadian Urologic Association Scholarship Foundation, and some money from the research network that we're able to, at least, while we would have liked to have funded all 11, and a lot of them were really great, we had a patient from Kidney Cancer Canada on the group that helped decide which ones we're going to move forward, and we're at least able to get those 3 moving. So, thank you.
I'd like to add something to that, actually, just more from the academic research side of things, and how important some of these initial pilot investments and some of these sorts of projects are absolutely vital in building the momentum that's needed to keep something successful going. There are other funding sources for researchers. I'm speaking specifically of academic researchers. Canadian Institute of Health Research, BioCanRX, Terry Fox Foundation, et cetera, who fund in a very, they're looking at scientific excellence in cancer, and that's great. And so, for example, the group that I started working with was working on a viral therapeutic agent, and the concept that a virus could actually be used to treat cancer. None of these granting agencies actually believed it. They said, you're never going to treat cancer patients with a virus. That's ridiculous. And so it was actually a cancer foundation that gave this group a $25,000 pilot grant. And that was enough for this team to prove the concept. It was completely safe in their animal models. And that team was then able to go back to these other agencies and capture some of these other really important grants to push the work along. And now this is something that's in clinical testing around the world. Kidney cancer patients have been treated with some of these agents. And it really all started from that initial pilot work that's really, really fundamental to getting some of these great ideas off the ground.
When you when you look at those dollars, and as Ranjena had pointed out earlier, that we need more money, so that it really is, if you wave a stack of 20s in front of somebody, you're going to get one reaction. Wave a stack of hundreds in front of them, you're going to probably get more of their attention. That we have to do. And Deb, this question really goes to you. When you talk about the prevalence of mortality versus the amount of money that is going into research in those areas, there's a bit of a disparity.
Question, Stephen? Was that a question? I'll try to make it into a question. So what do we know about kidney cancer incidence prevalence in Canada? So we know that about 6,000 patients are diagnosed every year. And we know that there are probably about 20,000 people, the prevalence, about 20,000 people out there who have had a diagnosis of kidney cancer in the last 10 years. There's something curious about kidney cancer, and maybe somebody here has some insights about this, but when somebody has a small breast tumor, they'll wear the pink ribbon and they call themselves a breast cancer survivor. When somebody has a kidney tumor removed, they bury it deep in their memory and they don't think about it again. And so they don't go out there and say, well, kidney cancer is something that I'm going to support, or I even want to affiliate with an organization. And part of it is those words that a lot of us have heard from our urologists when they say, I got it all, and you're cured. And a lot of us have been cured until we weren't, right? And I don't mean, there are some earlier stage patients who are probably cured. Surgery is our best hope for a cure, and it still is. But it's different in kidney cancer, and I'm not quite sure why it's different. But what we need to do somehow is to reach every Canadian who has been affected personally by kidney cancer, and their families and their children. And it's not all about fundraising. It's all about getting information to them. If somebody, for example, was diagnosed under the age of 46, the Canadian guideline, Dr. Rayoma, you listening? The Canadian guideline says that you should probably have genetic screening because you have a higher probability that kidney cancer is a hereditary kidney cancer. And wouldn't you want to know that for your siblings and for your children? So there's information that is coming to light. There's a renewed look at surveillance. Is 5 years long enough to surveil? It may not be. There are patients like me, I didn't recur until 22 years later. Who knew? So there's a reason for us to reach those patients. I haven't the faintest idea how we're going to reach patients who were diagnosed 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 15 years ago. I have no idea how we do that.
Do we have some other questions?
Canada, the United States, and all the drugs that are available. And my question is this: we have scientists here, but this is a worldwide problem. Do we have access to all the other clinical trials being done around the world in Germany or places like that? And do our scientists talk to other scientists to find answers? So we talk about all this money here, but is the research being done at the same level in all these other countries around the world to find the cure to kidney cancer, let's say? And will we get to know about this? And will those drugs come to Canada eventually?
So Victor and I speak on the phone fairly regularly. So yes, the research is being done in a coordinated way across the world. So a lot of kidney cancer research is global. The trials that we've talked about that are here in Ottawa, many of those are global trials. They're accruing in many countries around the world. So there is a lot of collaboration. When I spoke about the woeful underfunding of kidney cancer, that is true around the world. It's certainly true in the United States. So there are patient groups in the US who are lobbying their Congress for more government funding for kidney cancer, and they are banging on the streets and trying to get money for kidney cancer research projects. So around the world, it's a huge global problem. You can say that there's almost an epidemic of kidney cancer on the horizon. So it's a huge problem. Some of the countries where it is the worst, like Latin America, in Asia, they're not the countries that are going to do the research. We have the opportunity in the Western world to do the research. So yeah, this isn't, I don't think we can sit back and say, let's let the United States take care of this for us. We've got an opportunity here in Canada, and we do punch above our weight as a research team and as a patient group in Canada. We punch above our weight, and fund those pieces of research that can really move us forward. And I think that's it. So just don't sit back and let somebody else try to figure this out, because it ain't been happening on its own.
We have another question at the back.
I just wonder if you're looking at, in some of the research dollars that you're dedicating, or the priorities, to prevention as well, primary prevention, and if particularly if the incidence is raising, and there are some proven risk factors that are environmentally related. I think there's a lot of appetite for a focus on environmental influences on cancer, the toxins that we do have, and particularly in North America, lack of the precautionary principle. I mean, this could be a good way to support more funding too.
Yeah, and like if you look at even at the James Lind Alliance, like those priorities that were set, I think one of the priorities was, the cause, the risk factors, diet. So that's a question that a lot of patients, caregivers spoke to across the country. And so absolutely, we're not just, while the subject is called Cure It, we're also talking about, prevent it, quality of life, survive it, the survivorship care plan. So for those who are, 10, 15 years past, after their surgery. So we definitely, in the initial setup of the network was, quality of care, survivorship, personalized medicine, and genetics. So those were the main original 4 pillars. So it's not specifically only to treatments and therapies. And that's why, I wanted to say that, if you're passionate about if you're passionate about nutrition and you want to help move the dial forward on, nutrition, or if you're passionate about some other question, we really can try and match and find the best scientists here in the country and say, look, we really want you to look at this in kidney cancer, and we really want to answer, what are the best dietary recommendations we should be offering them? What kind of research, what kind of evidence can we prove so that, we can go and give this to all the GPs, we can give this to all of the, naturopathic doctors and say, here, you were right. This was what you said, and this is the evidence, and you can now take this forward and go to the medical schools and go to, all the patient advocacy groups and say, this is the evidence, and we proved it.
We have another question over here.
Hello. It's about accessibility to a trial, to a clinical trial. My husband, oncologist, she said that because we live in Quebec, we do not have access to clinical trial in Ottawa. So we live in Gatineau, 25 minutes from home. And she said that what I can do for you is to at least register you for register your husband to a clinical trial for, let's say, Montreal area. So how come I'm a Canadian, we're Canadian, and you're telling us that clinical trial is for everywhere, it's done everywhere, it's accessible everywhere, and how come from, let's say, somebody, a resident in Quebec, province of Quebec, cannot access a clinical trial in Ontario? So I cannot believe it. I'd like to have an explanation, or maybe if she's wrong.
Dr. Rayum,
I'd like to know.
Great question.
Dr. Rayum, is that the
So there's a historical answer to that, which was the cancer clinic in Ottawa capacity. It was exceeded in the past when there wasn't a cancer clinic on the Gatineau side, and so we could not take Quebec patients for standard of care treatment. So the Gatineau side has created a beautiful cancer clinic, which I have trained 3 of the oncologists who work there. But it's true, the clinical trial facilities there aren't as extensive as you would find in Montreal or Ottawa. So we're open to actually, on a case-by-case basis, exceptions for clinical trial issues. Theoretically, technically, it is Montreal's catch basin for clinical trials patients, and so we'd want to discuss it with the oncologists who are the leads of any study in Montreal before we would bring across to our center, but it's a case-by-case basis on that. But as a standard of care, for standard of care patients, it's there's a cancer clinic in the Gatineau side, so you can get your standard treatments there. Clinical trials are a different story, so if they want to talk to us, we're happy to talk at any time about clinical trials.
Any more questions out there? I have a question for Anna. Anna, what are some of the criteria that patients have to meet when they are thinking about, entering a clinical trial? Because not everybody is eligible for every clinical trial.
Yes, that's true. So after you've had time to consider participating, so we always explain it in great detail and then let you go home and think about it and ask questions. And then you are entered into what's called a screening period, where you have to undergo several tests in order to confirm that you are eligible. Those tests are often scans, so CT scans and bone scans, blood work, and a physical exam. So with the doctor, they would examine you, and then we would take your medical history as well. Sometimes some new drugs might interfere with the heart, say, so we don't want people who have serious cardiac comorbidities. And then at the end of that period, which is usually about 4 weeks, then we determine if you are eligible.
We have another question down here.
I'll take it to him after I've got the mic. Yeah. One question I want to ask, and probably between Deb and Anna, is, quality of life. And could you talk about how important it is for the patients to have input into the creation of the trials, input into, you Deb brought up kind of an ethical dilemma this morning, which was a serious one in terms of somebody receiving water, as a placebo. I understand the efficacy of trials and, how you want to do it. But I think about that, and I think of a case, I think of when I was working in cancer care, there was a woman who was coming in a snowstorm to get her chemo, and she died. Now just think, if somebody was coming in a snowstorm thinking it was so important to come and get this drug, and they were actually getting water. I mean, you have to think about these, and you have to think about, from the patient's perspective, these are tough drugs. You need to build in all those quality of life questions. There needs to be a standard of, when you create a trial, it must have all these. Most of them do now have quality of life. But it needs to be, that quality of life data needs to be just as important as the data about the drug. It needs to be, because you're going to find alternative and complementary things that, that you need to research and study about people's quality, and you'll get that data through quality of life, as well as getting data about the good drug, whether the drug works or not. So can you both kind of talk to that?
Can I start and we'll go over? So, Pat, you raised something really important. I think I would put it under the term of patient-reported outcomes. So with every trial, and I've been personally on 2 clinical trials myself, and I had a very positive experience on both trials, and never was I given IV saline solution anyway. So when you're on a trial, you get asked to fill out a lot of questionnaires about how you're doing and your quality of life, et cetera. Those are called patient-reported outcome measures, or PROMs. What we want as patient advocates to make sure is that we are asking questions that actually matter to patients. Because sometimes they're very general. So did you sleep at night, and they ask you about your sex life. Why anybody wants to know that, I have no idea. It doesn't help you get a drug funded. So anyway, so you answer a whole bunch of questions. As patient advocates on the clinical trial design front end, we need to be part of designing what those questions are. And I've advocated for making those quality of life measurements a daily thing, like an app on your phone that you can say, today I'm really feeling crappy, because sometimes the day you go into clinic is a good day that month. So we need to make them more regular, we may need to make them more patient-centric, and we have to get at the question of, what do patients value? Because these drugs are exceptionally, ridiculously expensive. Sorry to the table in the back, but they are. They're very, very expensive medications, and especially when we start looking at doublets and triplets and quadruplets of drugs. They're ridiculously expensive. The only way we're ever going to be able to report on how great a certain treatment is if we know truly, deeply, madly what difference it made to a patient. Right now, we're just skimming the surface of that with really basic level questionnaires, I think.
Yeah, so most clinical trials do have quality of life questionnaires, and some of them now are electronic, so you get a phone or tablet that you can bring home, and often, yeah, you're either filling it out every day or for a week at a time. So yes, that is something that is being looked at, and also for patients who don't know if they want to follow the rigors of a clinical trial, after they talk to their oncologist about what a good idea it could be to participate, then we as research assistants come in and we go through the logistics with you before you decide to participate, and we make sure you are up for the challenge of how many visits that you would need to come in for, and we explain how many blood tests and everything so that you know ahead of time, and so that there are no surprises. And of course, it's always an option to withdraw consent. So you always have that option. You're not pinned down to this. And it's always patient interest first. And we always do what is right for the patient as opposed to the integrity of the trial.
If I could just add something. One initiative that we're really trying and to get off the board, and we're just really looking for the funds for this, is that I mentioned this database that we have across the country, and hopefully if there's any patients here today, if you do one thing is next time you see your oncologist or urologist, you can ask them, are you part of the Canadian information system, or if not, could you be a part of it? But also we really want to include quality of life in that database, because right now, we're able to easily include your scans, your blood work, your history, all your medical history, all of that information that comes from your regular visit. But what we would love, and we're trying to get a pilot project started, is to include, at your appointments, if you would be willing to fill out a very brief questionnaire, whether it's a tablet or a piece of paper, and that information is so important because not only can we answer how your journey went over the last 5 years, how you felt over the last 5 years. You might have been you might have had your ups and downs in terms of your scans and your history, but also how your quality of life was it impacted, the quality of life of your caregivers. So it is something that as academics and researchers is a high priority. It's been a high priority based on what the patient groups and advocates have said, and it's definitely something that we'd love to continue to invest our money into.
At BioCanRX, we also recently funded a team of social science researchers, and this was getting to your point about sort of the arduous nature of looking at a clinical trial and trying to decide if a patient was going to participate. So we've actually funded a group to work with patients in the development of a clinical trial design that we're about to launch, because we want to make sure that these trials are actually enticing for patients, and perhaps if scientists in the lab who are used to not treating patients are actually designing these trials, we're missing the boat on really what would a patient actually agree to participate in, and why did we design our studies this way if we're not going to actually be able to reach the people we want to help. And so we do actually now make that a feature of our design for our early clinical trial projects, that patients are involved in that whole process.
Just another question. I was in the other room, and I don't know if I read it correctly. It seems that the Western provinces are covering the cost of some of these immunotherapy drugs. It said 000 BC, and I noticed that in Ontario, the cost of the patient is $3,400. Like, is something being done about the cost of these drugs? I mean, we keep coming out with all these new therapies and new drugs, but like you said, Deb, they're very expensive. So there's a lot of people here who probably can't afford these drugs, and that's what's going to keep us alive. So what happens with that? I mean, is the government going to help us or not? Pay for these drugs?
Okay, so that you were in the Fed Up With It room.
Yes.
So in the Fed Up With It room, there is a display about the Cancer Certainty campaign, which is a major campaign of 35 cancer groups all working together that was started by Kidney Cancer Canada, and Kidney Cancer Canada still leads this. It's not about the immuno-oncology drugs, Victor, it's about the oral drugs. So that we call them the take-home cancer medications, but the oral drugs. So the oral drugs are not fully funded in Ontario or the Atlantic provinces. Like a pill. Any pill, like Sutent, like Afinitor, like, you know, I'll get shot for using brand names, but like any of the kidney cancer drugs that we take as standard of care. So as one of our questions came from Quebec, why is this different for patients in Quebec? The sad truth is we don't have a Canadian healthcare system. We have very different provincial healthcare systems. What we're trying to do as patient advocates is to bring about some harmonization and some equity across the country. So by all means, when you go to the Fed Up With It room, pick up one of those postcards, and if you have questions, the CanCertainty website, it's a project led by Kidney Cancer Canada, we'd be happy to address them. And we're going to be putting a lot of pressure this week in Nova Scotia because they are, you know, very close. We've done all of the math telling them how to fix the problem in Nova Scotia, and it's gone into one of the party's platforms in Ontario for the upcoming election next year in Ontario. So we're pushing, but not just Kidney Cancer Canada, 35 cancer groups. So what we need to make sure is that governments know that cancer is important and that being a Canadian should mean being a Canadian. It shouldn't depend upon which province you live in, whether you live or die or go bankrupt.
So maybe as closing comments, maybe each one of you could give your take on what you think is the most important thing for us to do as patients and caregivers, you know, in finding a cure. Deb, did you want to start? You're done. Deb's done. Ranjena?
Well, thank you so much for letting me be part of the panel. I guess, I wanted everyone to be just aware that we have a kidney cancer research network. It's actually quite a rare thing. If you look across the other types of cancers, we're really fortunate that you've got a kind of go-to place for all of the kidney cancer researchers, and we're always continually trying to add, if you hear of anyone who's not part of the network, like, there's no door that will be closed. We want to keep growing our network. And so I wanted you all to just know that there is a group. We're like passionate about trying to move this dial forward, and that's what we do. That's what I wake up every morning and think about. And then also, I just wanted you all to know that every little bit helps. So it doesn't necessarily, we were talking about dollars and stuff, but it's also just about joining that trial, you know, getting out there, talking about the fact that you have kidney cancer, and seeing if, you know, maybe someone else will say, look, you know, I want to support you in some way, and you can tell them, like, I'm passionate about research, or I'm passionate about survivorship, I'm passionate about Kidney Cancer Canada. So, you know, think about that, and there's lots of different ways you can get involved.
I would say from my perspective, I mean, fundraising is obviously imperative. I don't need to tell anybody here that. But I really think that patients and caregivers' voices in setting research priorities for how those research dollars are going to be spent is absolutely critical. There is not enough money for kidney cancer research at large, cancer drug development in Canada or anywhere. As you said, you met in a room and had 29 priorities and then had to scale it back to 10. And do you have enough money to fund the 10, right? Would you rather fund 29? Exactly. So fundraising is obviously key, but really, if you're going to have to make some choices, make sure that your voice is heard when those choices are being made.
Anna, did you have a closing remark?
Yes, and just to answer your question again from the beginning, how patients can help. So you know that when new drugs are approved in your province, they need to have gone through rigorous clinical trials, and those clinical trials cannot take place if patients are not participating. And so if, you know, it has happened where there's a clinical trial that they just could not get enough patients on, and so it had to close and the results were never published. And so you are essential to having these new drugs approved and available for you to use.
And they're on the website. So if you go to the kidneycancercanada.ca website and go on the clinical trials button under patients and caregivers, we there's the team at Kidney Cancer Canada work tirelessly to update it. Anytime I hear of anything, I always make sure it's up there. We try and put things on before they're even open so that you know something is coming. You can speak early to your doctor and you can see where across the country things are happening. It's very fluid, so check often and have a conversation. Even if you don't see something on there, ask your doctor about research and see what you can do.
Thank you very much. I think this was a very informative panel. Thank you.